online sheet music incorporated.
All right, and he walks for all the best candidates.
Have no life.
No.
In human relations.
Organizing superstar.
He gets resolutions passed by the state party,
Yeah, right.
among other things.
MPD.
Sure, and I was able to actually see Lucas chair meeting last week, the Mountain View Coalition for Sustainable Planning. Runs a great meeting.
All right.
Okay, Rowan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rowan Pike. I'm a guest, and I represent 500 Congress.
All right.
Gonna go right forward.
Hello, Amanda Montes, your treasurer and community outreach specialist at the Mid Peninsula Regional Open Space District.
Hi, Eric Fernandez, political director, and I don't work in politics either. I work at Arista Networks in North San Jose as a homeschool teacher, and I'm serve on the board of a local nonprofit, and also your rep for Essential Committee and delegate to the state party, and an official spokesmodel for Omar Shores for city council. Thank you.
Great. Good evening, Joshua
Did you
Bruce.
audition for that?
Okay. Joshua Bruce professionally worked for the California State Senate in the office of Senator Jerry Hill, SCYD president, also commissioner with the City of San Jose's Human Services Commission, and lifelong Democrat.
Because you're brothers, you have to say the same thing.
Sure.
All right, hi, I'm Emily. I work for, I'm secretary of SVYD. I work for the Tech Museum of Innovation as their website and social media specialist.
My name is Brandon. I'm the VP of Membership. I'm going to be with Councilmember Kenson Chu's office for only a short amount of time longer. And thank you.
And we had someone join us.
It's going to Oscar. We'll be taking the LSAT.
I'm Shia.
What is it?
I think I know mostly everybody in this room.
Say where you're from and what you spend your time during
I think I'm the youngest member of Central Committee.
All right.
Yeah, congratulations.
All right. And so now that we've all introduced ourselves, I'm going to take the mic for just a bit, and I want to further introduce our guest speaker for this month. David London is Senior Director for U.S. Government Relations for eBay. He is responsible for managing eBay's 50-state public policy program, which covers eBay marketplaces, PayPal, eBay Enterprises, and all other businesses or business entities for eBay Inc. He focuses on setting public policy solutions for eBay Inc. by focusing on key relationships with U.S. governors, state attorney generals, and legislative leaders across the country. David also manages a diversity of public policy issues ranging from online taxation to consumer privacy. He's also responsible for managing relationships with the Bay Area Congressional Delegation and outreach with the Obama administration. Prior to that, he was State Government Affairs Manager for Cisco Systems, and he worked with policymakers there on issues like broadband development, voice over internet protocol, and e-government implementation. And before that, he was over at VTA. I'm sure a lot of us have had a lot of interactions with VTA, and he did community outreach for them. And before coming to California, David was Chief of Staff for Maryland State Senator Ulysses Curry, where he coordinated legislative strategy on tax reform, telecommunications, and budget issues. He also briefly worked for the Maryland Democratic Party, helping to coordinate efforts for President Bill Clinton's 1996 re-election campaign. He was also a member of the executive board of the Maryland Young Democrats.
Yeah.
He also served 3 years as special assistant to former Prince George's County State Attorney and current U.S. federal judge Alexander Williams Jr. and began his public policy career as a legislative intern in the office of U.S. Senator Frank Lautenberg. So we've had a lot of overlap with all of our own histories and a lot of the work that we've done. So I think that's part of the reason that we wanted to make sure that we had some of his unique background come in to talk to all of us, because we have very similar points in terms of where our careers are going and where his is now. For many of us, and many of us work within the tech industry, and this is a really good opportunity for us to really have a great dialogue with each other and with David as a guest. I also want to point out some really relevant campaign experience that he's had. He was active in 2008 for then Senator Barack Obama's presidential campaign, active in the Democratic primary campaign in both California and North Carolina. And for the general election, he spent a month in North Las Vegas, Nevada, where he helped coordinate field efforts for the Obama for America campaign. He also served on the Obama for America Technology, Media, and Communications Policy Group, which gave advice to the campaign on technology-related issues. He returned to North Las Vegas in 2012 to help with the re-election campaign for President Obama. And locally, and nationally, he is chair of the TechNet California Political Action Committee. Gives us a good idea in terms of, how political money is spent, in terms of priorities of Silicon Valley. We have a good idea to ask some questions around that as well tonight. And he serves on the Tech America Silicon Valley Regional Board and served on the Board of Trustees for the San Jose Silicon Valley Chamber PAC and served on the Senate Select Committee on Autism, Bay Area Autism Regional Task Force, and is a former member of the 100 Black Men of Silicon Valley. And he received his undergraduate degree from New Jersey City University, where he majored in political science and minored in Afro-American history, and also studied at the University of Maryland's Graduate School of Public Policy. So that's quite a bit of information. It's a long bio, but I think it's one that we can all relate to in a lot of different ways in terms of our own volunteer work that we've done. So I'd love to give a nice round of applause for David.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I want to keep this very informal and interactive. You guys are cool with that?
Yep.
Is that cool? Great. Awesome. So it was interesting when we were talking beforehand, we were talking about some of the things I'll talk about today, and I was mentioning to somebody that, look, I'm not running for office, so I'm not going to be asking for your vote. I'm not going to ask you to walk any precincts. I'm not going to ask you to drop any allegiance in any neighborhood. This is all about you guys, and just if I can share and impart some information to you guys about my experience and what I've done throughout my career, and talk to you a little bit about some of the lessons that I've learned throughout my 20 plus years of being in public policy on one side and also being on the political private sector on the other side. So hopefully this will be helpful to you guys. So what I want to do today is sort of talk about a couple of things. First of all, I'll sort of run you through sort of my journey. As I was talking to my wife a few weeks ago when I was talking to her about speaking to you guys today, I said one of the things I don't like talking about is myself. So I do not historically talk about myself. So bear with me as I go through some of it. But hopefully some of the lessons that I've learned, because I was in the exact same spot as many of you years ago, it seems like now. So hopefully you can glean some from my experience. And then as I go through that, just really pay attention to, if you could, some of the things I talk about with networking. And if I look back where I've come from most of my life in Maryland, which I'm a graduate, as mentioned, in New Jersey, and then I've been up here in California. In order for me to get to these various places across the country, one of the things that have always stood still for me is always my power or my ability to trust the network out. And if there's any lessons you can learn from that, or any discussions you want to have around networking, I'd be happy to give you some tips on that. And then secondly, sort of near the end, I would like to talk to you guys about cooperation. It was interesting. I was a hard-charging partisan myself, and I still am to certain degrees, but I also want to talk to you all about cooperation. I think some things that we see in the world aren't as real as we think that they are, and there's a lot of differences with other folks, but also there's a lot of commonalities that I've learned, especially since I've been on the private sector. So first, so my story, it kind of began in 1988 when I was a sophomore in college. And there were two events that were happening that year. One was international, which had been going on for a long time. And the other one was domestic, which was a brand new one. Can anybody guess what those two events are?
What year was it?
1988. Yeah. Probably before most of you guys were born. Cold War winding down. No, close. Apartheid's one of them, exactly. Yep. And there was one other. This was domestic. You guys are young there. You know this one?
Ronald Reagan?
Yeah.
They weren't born.
Yeah, exactly.
I know history. Close, but in the primary, something happened.
Joe?
Oh, that terrible commercial.
Yeah, that was
The hands commercial?
Yes.
Or the Ducati commercial where it was,
Well, there's
where the revolving door was?
No, but that wasn't it. there was something else that happened in that primary.
I'm obsessed with campaign commercials.
Everybody with the Barack Obama forgets about Jesse Jackson.
Oh, okay.
So it was interesting. I had going into undergraduate school as a sophomore. I mean, literally, I went to college for basically two reasons. Because at the time I wanted to be a teacher, believe it or not, and I also wanted to continue to play football. And I also wanted to be near a big city, big city like New York. And so that's why I went to New Jersey. We had a small Division III football team, and plus they had good teachers education college there. And so I was happy, and I just didn't teach high school, coach football. But those two events in 1988 kind of shaped me to sort of who I am. Apartheid, which I had kind of heard about, a little bit, but I really started getting involved with this Black Student Council out there regarding apartheid and some of the atrocities that were going on. What's interesting about that is that you don't remember, maybe you weren't even born probably back there, but it's hard to really fathom how that particular country was just about 20 plus years ago. When you saw it, and if anybody, I've heard the reviews of some of the other reviews of this movie about the Mandela story, it's going to be really great. But it's just hard for us to imagine today that these things were on, in our lifetime. And so that was one thing. Secondly, it was the Jesse Jackson campaign. And I had never gotten involved in politics before. And when he spoke at the Democratic Convention in 1988, I believe it was in New York City, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the more powerful speeches I'd ever seen. And I did work before that in Jersey City doing some sort of local canvassing. But Jesse's campaign really galvanized me and just said to me as a young African American, you can basically do anything you want. A lot of times we used to always hear those people do whatever you want, but I could never picture people that were doing the things that I would like to do. But that particular race was really life-changing for me. And that was my first real step into politics. And right after that, that's when this ball started rolling. And I figured out, at that time, I didn't have any political connections. I didn't have a well-connected dad who knew people on Capitol Hill, even though I was from the D.C. area, to get a job or interning on the Hill. So I understood what I had to do was basically start meeting people, just starting to network around campus. And so that's when I joined the Black Student Union. A year and a half later, I went for the Senate, for college Senate, joined the political science club. And we really started getting involved in many things, like I'm sure every one of you are probably doing, or currently probably doing, on your college campuses. And then that led to my first internship, which is at Handgun Control, which is, I think it's called the Brady Center for Handgun Violence now. That was my first internship in 1989 in D.C. And that was all because I was talking to people. I was talking to somebody on campus who introduced me to somebody that they knew in D.C. on the Hill. They didn't have any jobs, and this person introduced me to a young lady at the time. Her name was Cheryl. And Cheryl actually eventually ended up being in the Maryland House of Delegates. And so all those networking tools that I was using at that time really paid dividends for me. And so at that time, it was really interesting, but I still did not know where I wanted to go with my life. So we're talking 1989, starting to get to 1990, that's getting closer and closer to graduation. And my parents would say, well, what are you going to do with a political science degree and a African American history minor? And I'm sure every one of you guys who have been poli-sci majors probably went through the same thing. What are you going to do with your degree? And then one day, we had this cooperative education, which is sort of career center type of stuff on our campus, it was Liberal Arts College. And a representative from Donald Payne's office, the former member of Congress in New Jersey, his district director came and spoke to us about various opportunities, in the world of policy and politics. And then I kind of latched onto that, and for me, and that was led to my internship at Senator Waltenberg's office, and keeping in contact with him and just finding out what other opportunities were out there was really big for me. And then about a year or so later, because I was actually on a 5-year plan, a year later, when I finally graduated, and again, many of you probably were too young or not born at this time, but 91 was really tough. So you can sort of picture where 2008 was really, really bad, and then 2001 when we had the telecom downturn was bad. 91 was pretty bad too. That was a really bad year to be a college graduate. So a lot of you guys can identify coming out with horrible economies. And at that time, I was fortunate enough, though, to get a job working as an intern with the Immigration and Naturalization Service at that time. So both my parents were public servants, and so I was happy to be a public servant, and I had a job, and I had a little tiny bit of money in my pocket. But it took me maybe about 2 months to realize that I did not want to be a federal worker. And I knew this wasn't my future. You know, I love my parents who spent their lives in public service, and they're still there, but I said to myself, there's something different, something more that's got to be out there for me. And then eventually, I told my mom, I'll never forget this conversation we had right before Christmas in '91, and I said to her, Mom, I said, this is a great job, you know, I'm happy to be here, but I want to leave the job right now, and I want to volunteer my time working on a campaign for Congress. And my mom nearly fainted, because in her mind at that time, I had a job, I had a steady job, it was building to possibly getting myself to be a PS5 or PS12, whatever that thing used to call it. Still call themselves that. But I told my mom, this is not where I want to be, this is not where I see my future. So that, I just literally left the job with no money and joined this guy who was running for Congress. His name was Alexander Williams, who's now a federal judge, and worked for him on the Democratic primary campaign up in Maryland. Now, he lost the primary that year, you know, but the experience that I got, which is the same experience many of you went through, was kind of life-changing, you know, and doing the stuff that I did on the Jesse Jackson campaign was one thing, but doing the hard-nosed grassroots door-to-door stuff on a congressional campaign in a newly created congressional district was a blast. But he lost, you know, and then my mom, she said, well, now what are you going to do? And again, just because things kind of fell into place and just meeting with various people, that Mr. Williams recognized that I was hardworking, and he was still state's attorney, which is basically district attorney of a large county in Maryland called Georges County, and he brought me aboard to be a legislative assistant. You know, so one thing led to another. And so at that time, I started building up. I continued to build up all my contacts, because I didn't have a lot of contacts in Maryland politics, but I started building up those contacts. And then that in '92, I think everybody knows what happened in '92. And that was Bill Clinton's inaugural campaign, which was another great experience. And I helped coordinate phone banks down in Montgomery County, Maryland, for the fall of our campaign, which is some of the most fun that I've ever had on a campaign at that time. And so after that, I decided that wasn't my thing. I mean, campaigns was my thing, and I had the job with Alex's office, and I had a steady job, but I was still always, my partner's problem was always searching for more. You know, what was my next step? Where did I want to go next? And I loved, for some reason at that time, I loved partisan politics. You know, if you think about the early '90s, especially '94, and I came to the age of the Gingrich takeover there in the D.C. suburbs, and that really impacted me. And when that happened, I decided, you know what, I don't want to join the Maryland Democrats Party. You know, so I decided to take less money. Before, I don't know why I did that. Take less money with a long commute, because Annapolis, for those of you who may or may not be familiar with the D.C. area.
It's not okay.
Yeah.
Both of us went to school there, so yeah.
You know, it's a long ways away, you know, to go to Annapolis every single day. But I just believe that there's a lot more we could be doing at that level of the state party to sort of help curb the tide of Republicanism that I saw in Maryland. As a matter of fact, the governor who won in '94 in Maryland barely won election that year. That was a huge wave election. And I think it was sort of like 2010 in a sense, but to me it was like deeper, because people were really angry in that year. So it was a tough year, but for me, it was all about being involved in the political politics in that particular area. And then you sort of fast forward to the next year or so, and then there was another seminal event that happened. And this one didn't happen in Maryland. It actually happened here in this state. We look at around August 1995, there was a huge event that happened here in Silicon Valley. And I want to know if anybody knows this.
Oh my God. See, this is August 95.
A big, huge thing that happened here.
And when eBay was founded?
It was actually.
You get the extra cookie.
You're correct on that, but no, actually that year in August of 2005, Netscape went public. And everybody remembers Netscape.
Yeah.
Many browser cut fifth grade.
Oh my gosh.
And everybody at that time was, what is this internet thing? You know, what is going on with this internet stuff? It sounds really cool. You know, I mean, I forgot what their IPO price was, but it was just something ridiculous. And you heard all these minted millionaires, you know, at 25 and all this other stuff. And me being on the East Coast, not the money part that attracted me, it was this new technology stuff that really attracted me. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then I left my job at the Real Democratic Party less than a year later, and I worked for a state senator, so I started doing work for him, and that's when we first started getting the laptops, and it was a heavy, heavy laptop. Yes, you remember laptops. And I loved it though, because you plug it in, you plug it into your phone connection, and then remember that old sound that used to be the old dial-up sound and everything. I mean, I used to think that was the coolest thing in the world, just dialing in, and I would be able to access information from around the world for all types of things. I used to read the National Journal, which really, at the time was my favorite periodical to read online, along with the Almanac of American Politics, etc. And I could actually see that stuff online. For me, that was just awesome, And then the next year, '96, was a big, big year for lots of different reasons. That's what they said when I joined the state senate and did a lot of legislative work there. And then that same year, I worked in Maryland Democrat, not the National Convention as a page for the Maryland delegation. That was when Bill Clinton got reelected that year. But there was another event for me, which was really big, and that was my first time visiting this state. And in '96, I came out here and visited one of my best friends from high school. He and his wife had lived up in Oakland, Piedmont area, and spent 2 weeks out here. And let's just say, when I got back to Maryland, I told my boss, my state senator, and I said, Yuli, because he called me Yuli, he was his and I said, Yuli, be forewarned, I will be moving out to California for next year. I loved it that much. And it was a combination of a lot of things. It was a combination of progressive ideals that I saw here in California. It's a combination of this technology boom that was sort of happening at the same time. And then just, for those of us who've been on the East Coast, and we know that there's a different way of looking at things in California. I mean, the rest of the country is now following California in a lot of things, especially on the progressive side. But back then, California was still the beacon where everybody wanted to be, and all the cool stuff was happening. And so, a year later, summer of '97, I knew nobody other than my friend up in Oakland and a couple other people. I knew nobody. And so what I started doing that next year is actually started to network. I started to network with multiple people from the other coast. And so I would just ask my friend, do you know anybody? His wife worked in communications, so I would ask her, do you know anybody in communications? She would introduce me to some people. She would introduce me to a headhunter, would introduce me to some people. And I made that summer of '97, I remember right, about 6 or 7 trips out to California for various job interviews, for various informational interviews, etc. Now, if you think that's expensive, it actually really wasn't, because I was taking my flights for Southwest going from Baltimore to Omaha to Phoenix to the Bay Area at that time. But it was all worth it because I was starting to build up my network. I was meeting with people from the Choral Fellowship. I was meeting with folks from PG&E, from Clorox, just anybody that I could sort of get my hands around and just say, look, I don't want to be out here. Can you just introduce me? And that whole summer I spent just networking in California. And there was a few job interviews I had, and actually one of the job interviews, which always brings me back, this kind of happened. I had a job interview at this little labor organization, public policy organization, Working Partnerships, back in '97. And I think if you guys can remember, anybody know who the head of Working Partnerships was at that time? Amy Dean was, but you know who her political director was? Cindy. There you go. Cindy. She was my first interview out here in California.
Wow.
And I turned it.
You turned the boss down?
I just think how different my career would have been. I wouldn't have been corporate, man. But I just knew, I loved her. It was a great opportunity, but it was sort of that same feeling I had with governance. I love it, but maybe not for me right now. And then eventually I was able to land a job, as I mentioned, with at BTA. And it was basically community organized, or basically community outreach. It was the time when they were building the Tasman West line out to Mountain View. I was doing community relations, so basically getting ticked off local homeowners, ticked off and complaining at us for digging up their streets and everything else like that. But for me, it was an opportunity to be in the place that I wanted to be, and just an opportunity to start building my network. And so I knew BTA was in the future, but it's actually where I wanted to be right there to get me in to the high-tech field. And so at that time, I already started meeting with a lot of folks sort of on the business side. But now I figured, since I'm out in California, I need to start to get to know political folks. And so I started networking, and I got introduced to, anybody know Kurt Everett? with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and that's with Kirk. And he was there. He's been there a long time. And Kirk actually started introducing me to people. Kirk went to a University of Michigan, and I met him at an event, and he started introducing me to people in Silicon Valley. And again, one thing led to another, and then I eventually got hooked up to somebody who actually ran government affairs, worldwide government affairs for Cisco. Now, in the late 90s, I don't know if you guys remember this, but Cisco was considered to be the end-all, be-all company. You know, they were talking about doing millionaires like almost every week coming out of Cisco. I liked it not because of the money. I was really attracted to the cool company because they were building the pipes of the internet at that time. And so eventually I got into Cisco, not in government affairs though. Actually, I started out in customer service for a couple of years, just doing this customer service, customer advocacy for a lot of enterprise companies. But I knew Laura Epson, who was the head of Cisco Government Affairs at that time. She didn't have any positions, but we still went out and networked and talked to each other. Occasionally, I would say to her, hey, can I tag along with you guys to an event? You know, and she let me go to a couple of fundraisers, and I wasn't even in government affairs. And then, as I mentioned, there was a big downturn in 2001. And so right after that, I was still at Cisco, but Laura let me join her team afterwards. Things started to be a big, huge layoff. And then I was like, finally, I'm in my world. I'm in high tech, you know, and I'm doing public policy, you know, the two things that I've actually always wanted to do. And my journey at Cisco was a lot of fun as well. And Cisco taught me another thing. For the first time, I actually had to deal with people with different points of view. In government affairs, for those of you who are in government affairs like me, know that you have to balance a lot of things. And also, too, you have to deal with people that you may not agree with, you know, strongly disagree with on a lot of things. You know, we kind of have to do that sometimes. And it taught me that I actually had to sometimes bite my tongue, because I was very opinionated. Still opinionated on my beliefs. You have to bite your tongue at first, and eventually I became to start understanding where other people were coming from. You know, my wife used to say to me, because she's much more left than I am. I'm left, but she's much more left than I am. She would say to me, how do you go to those fundraisers? You know, how do you go to those Republican fundraisers? You know, I mean, it just made my skin crawl. She used to say, I see it on television. She would say, well, it's not that hard. We talk about business issues. We don't talk about voting rights. We don't talk about choice. We don't talk about affirmative action. We talk strictly about business, and we talk about technology. That's all I talk to them about. And when you sort of you peel that back, you find out they're actually human beings. Now, not the Tea Party people, talk about the normal, quote-unquote, Republicans. And I started seeing that you can actually have a decent conversation with people who you may not agree with. You know, you may have various huge, deep, beliefs, and you may disagree with a lot of them. But I started finding out that it took a while, because this was in the Bush era, too. And so the early 2000s was the Bush era, and all that stuff that was going on with that administration was, for me, was abhorrent. You know, it was tough for me to watch a lot of that stuff. And I'll never forget one time I had to go to a Bush fundraiser. This was yeah.
You poor man.
Yeah, it was tough. It was in 2000, his re-election, so it was 2004. And it was interesting. And I had to do everything in my body to just not throw up. And it was literally that tough. But, you know, little funny story though. I was there with one of my good friends from Cisco. She also had to go, and she's Latina, and the cameras kind of panned in on us for quite a while. But it was tough. But at the end of the day, I told myself, hey, I did it. You know, I was able to do that. You know, and you start seeing that you can actually do certain things. You know, and I wasn't there to promote him. I was just there as a corporate representative to listen or what have you, and hold my nose. But I was there nonetheless, and we did it. And then it brings me to the internet and getting my job at eBay, you know, which I've been there going on 9 years this January. And this has been a fun ride. I mean, this has been a fun company. And the reason why this has been a fun company, why I've stayed there for so long and I've had opportunities to leave, is just one key word in eBay, and it's called disruption. And we are a technology company that disrupts current business models, and we rely upon our users all across the world to help move us forward, so they can sell online, so they can be active and sell online, creating jobs, small business jobs, etc. And so it's all about the internet and keeping the internet free and open for everybody. And so that's why I love it at eBay. Look at some of the new, what we call the sharing economy companies, which we're all familiar with. If you think about, the Ubers of the world, if you think about, Airbnbs of the world, TaskRabbits, etc. These are all disruptive companies. And I came in at a time at eBay when we were just disrupting everything. I mean, we had people ticked off at us left and right, from everybody from retailers to ticket resellers slash brokers, just pissed off at us because of StubHub. We had banks didn't like PayPal at all, and so we were totally we still bust up a lot of traditional businesses, and it's a lot of fun. And for me, the internet is that one industry that brings together progressive values, which I agree in, and those are the things that allow individuals to be free to create and do what you want to do as an individual. Whether you want to sell online, you want to buy online, that's your business, and the internet should be free and open. That's why we had big debates in net neutrality and other issues, so-called HIPAA a couple of years ago, some of you maybe are familiar with. These are the things that are keeping the internet open for all. And so that journey has just been awesome. And our company continues to do well. We have a host of issues, which I won't bore you with today, but happy to follow any of you guys if you're interested in different issues. But they're a lot of fun. But it's because we are doing things that are disrupting traditional business models. And if we ever get away from that, that's when I'll go right back to my networking side. Like, I still network. But I'll go back to that and say, okay, what's my next move? Where am I going to go next? And then one last thought I just want to give you guys there. I have 15 minutes, right? That's probably going to be over. Just one last thing I want to say to you is about just making sure when you network, just you got to take risks sometimes. For me, coming from the East Coast to the West Coast, I mean, at the time, I didn't have this energetic thing right back here. But sometimes in life, you have an opportunity to take a chance, and back in those years, I had an opportunity to take a chance. I left, like I said, a secure government job to work on a campaign. I left my family and friends on the East Coast to take a chance to come out here. And sometimes you have that window, of opportunity to do it, and then when that window closes, it's tough to actually go back to it. So if you guys see that window open, my advice to you is just go through it. Go through that window, take that risk, take that chance. Because that's the way you can be successful. We're all living in Silicon Valley. That's what it's all about. And then the last point is, just make sure as you continue to go through, have your beliefs in your politics, that I'm sure I agree with you guys at 95%, but also understand the other side. Some of them actually have a good point of view. And I think for me, when I was in young times, I couldn't see that. First, I just saw them as the enemy. That was the right. They were evil, bad people. But some of them are good people. They have a good heart and they want to do the right thing. Just this guy. So with that, I'd be happy to open up to any questions you all may have about anything that I talked about.
So I have a few minutes for questions. Eric?
Have you thought about running for office?
No. Well, when I was younger, I would say that it crossed my mind in the early 90s.
What level of government?
What did I think about? I thought about like state office or state legislature, or your own House of Delegates at that time. But then I started seeing, and I don't want to discourage anybody, but I just started seeing a lot more, and I felt I could do a lot more being a staffer and or getting on this side of the world than I could running for office. You give up a lot, as you guys know. With public officials, especially family. I mean, especially now, I take my family very seriously. So I did it one time, but probably couldn't do it.
Sure. Would you get computer?
When you're sort of getting involved with the different organizations you work with, in terms of speaking for the tech industry, does that ever conflict with your role as someone who's speaking for eBay? Sort of speaking for what the tech industry as a whole wants in terms of legislative and governmental priorities versus what maybe eBay is focused on.
That's a good question. Especially because the tech industry is so diverse. You run the gamut from us on the internet side to software folks to hardware folks to chip makers. You just never know. So yeah, and that can be tough. With our point of view, we do a pretty good job of advocating what we kind of need, and if we can't get it from the overall community, we'll start doing it ourselves. But generally speaking, very rarely do organization work conflicts with the overall technology community. And if that happens, then it means that organization will have to sort of accuse itself of management. Like we've had differences with, say, Amazon on internet sales tax policy. So certain of our organizations don't take a position on it because we come down with
So a lot of tech companies are jumping into the immigration discussion. I guess the first part is they jumping in and what's their view? And also, it seems like we maybe want the same thing but for different reasons. So how do we work together?
Yeah. So on the immigration rate, yes, we do it mostly through our trade associations. So if you think about TechNet, other than our main trade association that we advocate for, our particular piece is very similar to the overall technology industry. We want to see, increased H-1B visas. We want to see more permanent residents here because the issue that we're dealing with here is talent. We're having a serious talent, gap. We have to. A lot of our engineers have to go back to their countries after 5 years after their H-1B visas expire. It puts us at a competitive disadvantage because we're not competing against, another company in, say, Austin, Texas, or Seattle, Washington. A lot of startups that actually being created by a lot of entrepreneurs that are immigrants that we couldn't keep here, but they have to go back to Delhi, or they have to go back to Shanghai. They're creating these new cool startup companies because we can't keep that talent in these countries. So yeah, we've been involved in that debate through our trade associations mostly, but because we're so disruptive, a lot of times our issues, we have to keep our eye on the private issues that hurt us directly, like internet sales tax, net neutrality, et cetera. But that's where we still engage on through much larger organizations.
We have time for one more question.
So what would you say has been the biggest key for your networking in the past?
I would say that the biggest key has been just continuing to make new and enduring contacts. And I think once you start making those contacts, as it's just keeping it up. Being consistent and making sure you're following up all the time with folks. And I think that's one of the things you kind of get frustrated sometimes because some people don't return your email, or back to return your phone calls, your emails and stuff like that. But if you try to be consistent and follow up with them as much as possible, that's the key. Don't get frustrated. Most people want to do the right thing. Most people, especially in today's world, way too busy. But it's constantly just following up and just being in people's face. I was one who just loved being in people's face. Just say, hey, I'm looking for something. Hey, do you know anybody? Or can you make an introduction? So if they don't even have a job, ask somebody, hey, can you make an introduction for me? Can you introduce me to this person? Or do you know somebody there? So I think it's just being persistent.
Actually, Jonathan, can you be quick?
Yeah, no good sleep.
Okay, so my question is, and this could be a continuing discussion, but maybe you could give a pointer to our young Democrats here. On something, and I too lived in DC for about 7 years, and the Democratic Party is clearly trying to reach technology industry. In this valley, it's not, the outreach is could be a little bit more refined. What are some tips for the Democratic Party to go to, see, that's why it's worth it. What are some tips you believe would be key for a party to come and establish good relationships with the government affairs people in the technology industry?
Can I actually add to that and ask, how do you think we could best engage young tech workers in civic opportunities like Young Democratic clubs to be able to get them involved in local politics? They're all new to the area, and it's like this group we haven't been able to tap into. Peninsula Young Democrats are trying to start up. They're just up, the road from us essentially, and we're trying to grow. And what are the best ways that you think that we could probably do some of that outreach? And then also in general, as a party.
Okay, so first with the party, I think it's what it's going to have to take is understanding the Valley Board. You know, when I mean by the Valley, I'm not talking about understanding the culture of the Valley, but I mean actually why businesses in Silicon Valley tech companies operate the way they do and what they are doing. You know, and it's an inherently complex businesses all across the valley. Was getting to know the companies, you know. And so I would recommend for the parties to start reaching out to a couple of our trade associations. I'll name one of them, and it's TechNet, you know, which has been here the longest in the valley since 1995. When they were first created, after an initiative that was created, it was a shareholder lawsuits, and actually created TechNet. That's how TechNet was born. That's one area. The second one is to visit companies. You know, we need, not just we, we're talking about Intel, Google, you go over the whole breadth of tech companies. We all have cool things to show, and we can sort of demonstrate the things that we do. But it's actually visiting the companies, getting to know some of the executives, or you know, the GR folks. And TechNet would be a really good into that. Silicon Valley Leadership Group, which we're also members of, would be another one that can really start helping organize those types of things. Now, Silicon Valley Leadership, that's partisan, maybe a little bit tough for them because they're actually funded a little bit differently, but still it's worth the conversation with Carl or even on that group about some opportunities there. So I would sort of do it through those organizations, specifically TechNet. They are political.
I already Googled it, it's all good.
So you all good. And to your question, Amanda, yeah, that's how do you get tech workers more involved?
Politically involved.
Yeah, it's interesting.
We don't want to be a dying animal.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a tougher one, a little bit tougher one. But let me just do some really quick thoughts. I mean, one of the things with tech workers that we find, they agree with Democratic beliefs most of the time. You know, and I would say probably 80 to 90% of the time they do, except for fiscal issues. You know, for most tech folks, you know, care about their stock, they care about their 501k, their 401ks, et cetera, et cetera. You got some more reading to do. They care about their 401ks, but they still, you know, but their personal beliefs are very strong towards Democrats. And so I would say one of the ways to sort of get them more galvanized is actually starting to find out who they are. I mean, I think I've heard, is anybody here in the tech company? You already got a few young Democrats in the tech community. And so sort of start organizing through them, you know, and I think that's the best way you're going to do it. Because it's, I mean, even us in government affairs, we kind of know some of our tech folks in our campuses and our companies, but we can't advocate for a political point of view, but it can be done by individuals that are there kind of starting it up. And so I would sort of just find out who the tech workers are, you know. It may be doing certain things at the polls, you know. Well, not too many people go to the polls anymore, but, you know, starting to meet people at various forums, you know, fundraisers, things of that nature. You know, like Congressman Honda's running for re-election. There's probably a lot of tech folks that are getting to his campaign. And just start reaching out to them, get them involved. You just don't know who they are. It's just networking. But there's no silver bullet that I've seen for that one because it's tough to reach them because they are engineers. They're there at 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock until 10 o'clock.
Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, I'll leave my cards if anybody wants to follow up with any questions.
Yes, and actually, I want to also thank David. David's actually part of the reason that I started coming to these meetings. So the reason I met him was actually because I went in for an interview at eBay. I didn't get a position, but he called me back and he shot me an email and said, "Well, let's talk." And he wanted to talk about what I could have done or what I can continue to do in my career to become a better candidate for that type of role. And I thought to myself, who does that?
Yeah, really.
Like,
awesome.
Yeah. And you know, that was like a year and a half, more than that ago, like about almost 2 years. And that type of giving back to the community is kind of like what I think we all hope we can do. You know, as young Dems, doing that for other people who we interact with. And, you know, so big thank you because this is exactly what we find callings to do, I hope, by type of outreach and networking. So So thank you.
I think we should give a big round of applause to your son.
Yeah.
Yeah.